Welcome to the Bill and Callie Show on WVLP LP 103.1 FM and streaming live at WVLP.org or on your TuneIn app. We are broadcasting live from the historic 1 Center Street building in beautiful Valparaiso, Indiana. The Bill and Callie Show is underwritten by Bill Moran and Callie Rosella. Now, here are Bill and Callie.
Good morning and welcome to the Bill and Kelly Show. I'm Bill Moran.
And I'm Callie Rosella.
And with us we have a very special guest with us today. I'm kind of passionate about the topic we're going to be discussing today. We have Brien Cron, right?
Correct.
I got it right. Awesomeness. Okay. What were you here to talk about? Yeah, the tiny homes. So Brien is the founder and president of the Chicago Tiny Homes, which was founded back in September 2017. Brien, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and tell us about how you started tiny houses?
Sure. A group of my friends and I, we were advocates for the homeless for the viaducts of Wilson Avenue and Lawrence up here in Uptown, and we would serve them, through basically meals, and bring them tents, sleeping bags, everything, all the daily necessities they needed until the end of 2017 or early 2017 when they evicted everybody from the viaducts. And we just had to get something done legally, so we came up with the idea of getting tiny houses started for the city.
Yeah, that's awesome. I basically saving some folks' lives, because basically at that point they took, if you all remember that in the news back then, they basically took the tents away. And which rendered people totally homeless. They at least had shelter, but now at this point they didn't have shelter. We're going to get back to that and talk about that in more detail. One of the things I just want to share with folks, some of the statistics on homelessness in particularly the Chicago area, and I'm going to speak with some of the data coming nationally. Now, the one thing, and I was talking to Brien about this before the show started, the disparity in reports from HUD, which is the government agency in charge of housing and keeping track of the homeless, and they create a report called the Annual Homelessness Assessment Report that they provide to Congress every year, and that acronym is AHAR. And interesting enough, what I have found is Chicago was not even in this report. It's not even listed in the top 10. But then in doing further research, I found this advocacy group, which is the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless. They state that in 2016, there were 80,384 individual instances of homelessness, otherwise individual people that were declared homeless. 80% of them were living doubled up, they say, and you explain that is as people living together in the same wherever it may be. Is that correct, Brien?
That's correct. They're either using people's couches or settling together in an apartment where they're not counted.
Yeah, and then it goes on to say, according to 2016 HMIS data, which is the homeless, help me out here, Brien, that is the information system, homeless information system, 23,808 people were served in shelter systems in Chicago. Of those, 7,538 had been living doubled up, as we discussed before. 76% of those shelter residents were black, 19% were white, and 5% were other, and 11% were reported Hispanic. Now, it is interesting, before we move on, I'll state this, is that I could not find demographics in the HUD report. which is, you would think that would be something that they would. And I'm going to speak with a couple other disparities that have in the way they report homelessness. So
do they go into detail about whether or not they're veterans or anything like that?
Well,
too?
in the HUD report, they do. In fact, that is one thing that they do, call out the number of homeless veterans that we have. But one of the things that I found between government agencies and these advocacy groups is that the way they report are vastly different. The government agencies take a snapshot in one day. So they go out and they either send the investigators out and they collect as many numbers as possible of homeless people that they can find. Where the advocacy group, I think, is they collect it in a broad spectrum over a year. So they collect people coming and going, and so they come up with an annual amount per year. So if you compare Chicago alone, 80,384 in a year of 2016, but the government agency, Chicago Housing Authority, reported 5,660 of that year, but that was a snapshot that they took on one particular day where they went out and collected it. So kind of hard to mix and match those numbers, but nonetheless, the advocacy group, I think, is we're going to hang our hat on because they were more diligent in trying to find out who was declared homeless. And again, homelessness is in the broad spectrum where the government declares homelessness. If you are in a situation where you are not paying a lease, or your name does not appear on a lease or a mortgage, otherwise you're living with someone, but your name isn't on the lease or the mortgage, they consider you homeless. So even if you're living with a family member, you're considered homeless. So just to give you, our listeners, an idea of what the government considers homelessness. And so, Brien, I'm going to turn it back to you so you can give us a little bit more history behind how you started up tiny houses, what is happening now with tiny houses, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Just to break in on that too, you said something about I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. Anyways, I'm just going to talk about tiny houses. Sorry about that.
No, go right ahead. Don't.
Lost my train of thought.
We're all
That's
friends
okay.
here.
If it
Don't
comes
worry.
back, just let us know.
Yep.
Okay. But tiny houses, again, was created as a tool to help our city fight homelessness, period. We wanted to do something legal because all the advocacy groups were just basically getting arrested or forcing people out of communities that they established that were tight-knit and were forced to break up. So we wanted to come back to the city with an actual legal avenue to house people. And tiny houses, we did some information, some research, a lot of research with a couple of homeless tiny house communities that have already been established, and we got together, we brainstormed, and we came up with Chicago Tiny House. Right now, we have everything in place to build a community. We just don't have zoning, and Chicago is one of the worst zoning procedures commitment in the world. It's so hard to get zoning, but we're praying and hoping that we'll get it through this year.
Yeah, I think that that goes without saying. Chicago is one of those cities that works, if you will. So define the word work.
But they don't want to help them here in Chicago.
Right.
Yeah, and so there's unions and all that whole aldermen and so on. So one question I have for you, this is called tiny house. Is that
correct?
Is that pretty much descriptive of what you hope to eventually provide, a small housing situation?
The houses that we want to build, we're starting with a program for the veterans and as a pilot program, and our houses will be about 303 square feet. Anything under the 600 square feet marker constitutes a tiny house. But our tiny houses are a little different. We cater these to veterans that could be wounded, ADA constituents, and stuff like that. So all of our houses are completely ADA compliant, which means that they would have a bedroom, living room, their own bathroom, and a living area.
With doors that are wide enough to accommodate wheelchairs and things like that.
Correct.
So,
Awesome.
perfect.
Yeah, and that's something I'm torn about because we work with veteran groups all the time, and the fact that we live in a society that would allow them to become homeless, people that put their lives on the line, and they come back here, and it seems like what happens to them afterwards. Very few people care.
Right, exactly, and it's awesome that they have HUD to turn to pay their rent, but there's not enough units through HUD for them to get apartments here in Chicago, and that's where we're trying to open the doors to more low affordable housing for everybody.
Now, is the goal to just build houses in separate little lots, or is it to get a piece of property big enough to almost make a little subdivision of these small houses?
Yeah, my goal is to create a community.
See, that's what I would love. I think that's awesome.
Community living, there's so many advantages to community living. I mean, just being in community with other people around you is one of the positives. But statistics show that when you have a good support system, you're going to make it in life. And that's our backbone of Chicago Tiny House. We want to create an atmosphere of community within our, so that people can progress.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's now getting to the individual units that you are looking at, and in a sense, they're individual little houses, right? Hence the name, right?
It's an exact house. Right?
Yeah, and I kind of saw pictures of these when I kind of did the Google search, and it's kind of interesting because there was a trend for a while where they had minimalist. And
well, it's still a trend right now.
And so they were
a trend, big time trend right now.
Sustainability. You don't need a McMansion to be happy. And I know personally for myself, I have a small home, but it's paid for. I'd much rather have a small home and not be house poor, where I can still do things. Makes more sense.
Yeah, we'd like to have a separate house for the dogs, though.
Well, yeah, that would be good. But,
maybe just Dexter.
You buy an extra tiny house for everybody else.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, but it is kind of interesting because there is people want to kind of minimalize and have something. But the thing that I would say, isn't this better? You have a small community, and these people are going to need services and maybe educational workshops and things of that nature. So it's kind of a benefit to have them in an area where they all can conjugate, and it'd be easier to bring them together.
You could have community gardens and things like that too, which would just be phenomenal,
Yeah.
It's phenomenal, but zoning for all those things is ridiculous.
Yeah, well, shame on you guys who aren't doing that.
Yeah,
that's why
we're talking about Chicago here.
Yeah, well,
Chicago.
there's lots of places like that, not just Chicago.
I need a place to park my car.
Exactly.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a
Number
shame.
one priority should just be helping people.
Right, it's a shame. You look at the skyline of Chicago, and it's hard to believe that it does have an issue like this. And it's one of the things that when I look at Habitat for Humanity and the work that they're doing within Gary is phenomenal. And that's one of the bright spots that's happening is their work. So what about Habitat for Humanity? Do you either cross paths with them or work with them at all?
I don't work with them at all, but I've heard of their work, and I don't have anything bad to say about them.
Yeah, all right. So I just wondered if they would ever get involved in helping construct some of these, or...
Right, I mean, everybody wants to help create the tiny houses, but we're stuck right now because of zoning.
So if there are maybe attorneys or people like that out there who would like to get involved and do some work pro bono, we'll get that phone number and that information out. And then also if people wanted to donate either financial or their time and effort once this gets started, we'll get that information up as well and get that to the people who want to do these good works.
Right. Oh, yeah. And again, we're dealing with some technology here.
Oh, yeah.
We're reconnecting
Reconnecting.
with Brien. But one of the things I would have to say, this is an election year in Chicago while we're waiting for
Yes, it
Brien
is.
to come back. Ooh, did we lose him?
I hope not.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
No, it's that dag-blasted internet.
Right. And speaking of election year, I mean, have you spoken to any of these politicians that are running for mayor of Chicago about these issues?
I have, and we're doing I'm in touch with a few of the candidates for mayor, and the ones that are interested in tiny houses. So we're going to go from there. Believe it or not, it was one of my strategies to get in touch with most of especially the alderman candidates that
Yes.
are coming in February. And we've built up a good team of aldermen-elects, I guess you call it. And we're going to go from the election on and see what we can do.
Excellent.
Yeah, we definitely have enough candidates running for mayor, that's for sure.
Oh, right?
So, I mean, my
TV is
goodness.
inundated with commercials.
The only thing I'm worried about is runoffs because
Yeah. It's so, yeah.
hurt the Chicago.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Is there a particular area in Chicago? Are you looking at all the wards in Chicago that maybe locating this?
I am open. Tiny houses and even the community can be placed anywhere where there's land. I've had a few aldermen approach me with locations, and we even got a lot from one of the aldermen set aside for it, but we can't do anything unless we have zoning.
Right.
So it kind of defeats the purpose asking for land without zoning.
So that's the block wall right now. You've got people
Correct.
willing
Well,
to,
there's nothing but zoning. If we
Yeah.
can get past that hurdle, we're golden.
yeah, and again, things happen but the thing is getting them to commit even after they're elected,
Right,
and
right.
so that becomes an issue. But maybe signs. So once you get the go for the to place these where they set a lot aside or what have you. Is there, do you have the resources built up behind that? So when you do get to
yeah.
go,
Start construction.
So
Yeah, we've partnered with a few third parties already. We have construction crews, but I mean, you can never have enough construction.
Sure.
crews.
Right.
We have an architect with plans, with professional plans. I mean, you name it, we have it. We just need zoning.
yeah,
Now, what is the average cost for one of these little houses?
We have two different types of houses, and the ADA houses will be about $25,000 per house, and the homeless project that we're trying to create, we're looking anywhere between 15 to 20.
It's amazing.
Now, there isn't any specific ordinance that's going to require you to make all these ADA, would there be?
No, there's actually no zoning laws on the books for tiny houses, period.
Ah,
And that's what the issue is.
right, and just,
We actually have to come up with new ordinances to get approved by the city council.
all right, and we're coming up here where this could be a campaign issue if it's brought up
Correct.
correctly. So, yeah, and because we have both aldermen and mayor, oh gosh.
Mayoral
Yeah.
candidates.
Yeah, we have just about as many mayor candidates as there are aldermen. So, everyone wants to run. Oh my goodness, yeah, this is one of the nation's largest cities, and to think that that we run across this issue again. Some of the pictures, and when we edit our video and put this up, I'm going to share some of the pictures of the heart-wrenching pictures of. I think I saw one of some poor guy sleeping in a bus stop shelter.
Right. That was taken in Chicago here just 2 days before the first day of the polar vortex.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. And kind of share with us, now that you bring that up, what happened during the polar vortex? Because, I mean, even if you were in a tent, that is not survival.
You survive in a
You
tent.
could not survive this. I mean, 50 below wind chill and 20 below solid temperature. And on the lakefront, just
Even worse,
bring
yeah.
that even
You saw
worse.
on the news. I mean, there was one tent city that's still in operation right now. Their propane tanks blew up. They all had to be removed from there. But it takes people like advocates of these people to get anything done here in the city. For example, that day of the polar vortex, there was one story I heard where the lady bought like 80 different hotel rooms and provided all these people with hotel rooms. I mean, that's what this city comes down to. That's why I'm still here advocating for my city, because there's good people here that want to make a difference. But, we run into political red tape, which shouldn't be.
Do you know of the people that died during the polar vortex in the city of Chicago? Do you know how many of those were homeless people?
I know of at least 3 people that died during the vortex, but I'm not allowed to get into that.
Okay.
Right.
I just wondered if there were any statistics out there yet about how many
There's
were homeless.
No hardcore statistics, but I'm sure you're going to hear of them soon.
And that's the thing I want to reiterate to our listeners. Hardcore statistics, because this is such a fluid data point. It changes by minute. And that's the danger when something like this, like the polar vortex, moves in. To know where these people are. Of course, you know where the tent cities are, but there's some poor guy curled up in a refrigerator box somewhere, or maybe not even that.
Under a viaduct
do people
somewhere
know where
or
he
whatever.
is?
Right. I mean, there's people living along our lakeshore hiding in bushes.
Sure.
It's absolutely crazy what they have to go through to live.
Yeah, and that's something I want to encourage everyone next time they're going to a game or play in Chicago. Think about these people. It's grueling. I mean, literally, people's lives are on the line every day, depending on what type of shelter they have.
Well, I mean, in the summertime, when you walk through Grant Park, you see these people who are sleeping on benches or under bushes and things, and those are the same people who are there during a polar vortex. Those are the same people without homes all the time.
And I'm sure, the thing that would shock a lot of people, of course, the kind of the stigma behind being homeless, number one, plus the stereotype added on to that.
Right.
I've known homeless people that had PhDs, and because
we're all about $1 short of being homeless.
Well, that's what I used to, I was a single mom for many, many years, and I was always one paycheck away from being a homeless person. It's easy.
Right. And
another thing that really gruels me is that, people treat homelessness as like an epidemic or a crazy disease that's never been heard of.
Exactly.
And it's that stigma. Like, we have beautiful things going on all throughout our country. We have over 12 different homeless tiny house communities that are thriving within their community, and that are actually putting numbers on how good that they're doing into their community, that their community is joining into their community. And, all we're trying to do is, we're not trying to recreate the wheel here, we're just trying to duplicate the process here. And, and one day I'm praying to God that, people understand that, and that, they'll see the good work that comes out of Chicago Tiny House.
Yeah, definitely, and I hope that gets spread throughout the nation. Some other things that I dug up. Well, one, I began looking at Chicago, and I'm going to classify as or call friendliness to the homeless. And there was an issue that just popped up recently with the panhandling ordinance. They had a panhandling ordinance that was put into place. Then the ACLU came to the defense of these homeless people and said, no, that's unconstitutional. You cannot prevent someone from sitting out on a public corner and collecting money for
Well, they're
food.
not preventing them. They're just giving them tickets for $50.
Yeah.
Which they have, right? Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
of
Oh, by the
course.
way, officer, let me. I could pay that.
They
No.
don't get in, they get enough of these tickets, they go to jail.
Yeah.
And, I mean, what cycle are they showing us? It's a vicious cycle.
It is.
Of
It's horrible.
imprisoning people.
So I dug up something that the National Coalition for the Homeless put together, and they call it Narratives of the Meanest Cities, which is kind of interesting. Sarasota, Florida is the meanest city in the United States.
Against homeless people.
Against homeless people. I mean, that's their ordinances, their, and just their attitude. Here's one, Lawrence, Kansas City. Lawrence, Kansas, excuse me. Thank you. Kelly weren't here, I'd be totally lost. Little Rock, Arkansas. That's so much for the friendly southern towns. Atlanta, Georgia. And my sister is actually in Las Vegas. There you go.
Well, yeah, when you're out there, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, right? Nobody talks about it.
Yeah, and so as I'm mentioning, as they go down, then Sarasota was number 1, Lawrence was 2, and then, let's see, we have 3, we have Little Rock, Arkansas, 4, Atlanta, and rounding off at number 5 is Las Vegas, and then Dallas, Texas is number 6, and so on. I mean, it's something, that you could see why this has become such a large issue, that these towns evidently don't have or anti-homeless ordinance, and, everyone has these people. Everyone falls on hard times. It has no, and by looking at statistics, it really has no social economic boundaries. It can happen to anyone at any given time. There was one report I do want, and it's interesting enough, HUD does not break down the demographics as far as ethnicity. So here is something that's alarming to me, as they broke down here as far as the percentage of people. Let's see here, 55% of those that were declared homeless were black. 6.5% were white. 33.1% were Hispanic or Latino, and 4.9% were other groups. Now, some other things that I guess I don't want to relate this because this can be happening. So otherwise, I don't want to pass this along. But the demographics of the people moving into the shelters is kind of alarming, because it's kind of flipped. There is, even though there's more black folks out there that are homeless, there's a higher percentage of white people that actually get into the shelters than black and Hispanics. So that, to me, and again, I don't want to, because I'm not sure that this is qualified, but nonetheless, it's people getting actually into shelters. Talk about that in Chicago. I know what the shelter situation is here in Northwest Indiana. What is how many homeless shelters are there in Chicago, and are they geographically located so people can get to them easily?
There are a few shelters here. There's a couple huge shelters. I actually work at one of them. But to tell you the truth, these shelters are all overcrowded. There's not enough shelter beds to accommodate all the homeless here in Chicago. On any given day, people are just dropped off here, and without a referral. The city of Chicago has set up this referral system, which I think is quite inadequate, but where every homeless person has to get a referral to go to the shelter. Now, this process is, they call 311, they have to wait like 2 to 3 hours to even get picked up. Then they go to Catholic Charities, which gives them like a background check and what do you call that? The intake process, and then they get sent out for a bed. So you're averaging about 4 to 5 hours of wait time just to even get a bed. So most of these people don't even want to deal with that. And I don't blame them, because I wouldn't want to wait that long either.
No, exactly.
And Brian, I want to correct something I said. I was looking at this wrong. Actually, the people in shelters, 76% of the shelter residents are black. 19% are white, so I was incorrect in that.
Yeah,
and
you were looking at who were doubled up.
Yeah, who was doubled up. And then 11% reported as Hispanic or Latino that actually make it into shelters. Brien, if you'll bear with us just a second, we have to do some business here as far as our station break, and we'll be right back with you.
Thank you.
problem.
Thank you.
You are listening to The Bill and Callie Show on WVLP LP 103.1 FM and streaming live at WVLP.org or on your TuneIn app. We are broadcasting live from the historic 1 Center Street building in beautiful Valparaiso, Indiana. The Bill and Callie Show is underwritten by Bill Moran and Callie Rosala. Now, here are your hosts, Bill and Callie.
All right.
Okay, welcome back, folks. And we're speaking with Brien Cron, and he is the president of the Chicago Tiny Houses. And we're just getting into how that started and the homeless situation in Chicago and some of the reporting that's come out on homelessness, which is, I'll be honest with you, it's just disconcerting to me that the government isn't doing a better job in getting those figures. And you could kind of understand that in a way because it takes a lot of effort. These advocacy groups, I venture to say, are probably volunteers and they are emotionally attached to this issue, so they're going to want to get out there and do their best job in finding these. Government agencies, I'm not sure. But
yeah, government agencies are paid 9 to 5 workers. After 5 o'clock, you don't see a one on the street, do you?
Nope.
No. Well, maybe not in the
That's
street.
where my issue comes in.
Yeah.
Well, in the street when they're leaving the local bar for whatever.
Kelly and I were thinking the same on that one, but I didn't want to say it. But Kelly, as everyone knows, Kelly, nothing. There's no filter.
Well,
no filter.
there is a filter.
It's a very small filter.
This a little bit too, right before break, and it's like the 311 system is there. It works from 9 to 4. Or 4:30 or whatever it is. What happens to these poor people after 4:30 if they need a pet? They can't call, so they're bound to living outside.
Well, that's something. Let's bring in another added layer to this, and that's warming shelters. Here in Northwest Indiana, I noticed something. When they published the list of warming shelters, and I actually worked part-time in one of them, and I didn't really know it was a warming shelter until someone said, this is a warming shelter. Really? Most of them are not open past their working hours, which are 9 to 5. And so, this is where,
so at night when the sun goes down and it's really cold.
Yeah, because you think about it logically, they could find a place, maybe they're not welcome, but they could find a place to be warm that's open, a business maybe. Maybe the business is kind and lets them in. But once that business closes, then this warming shelter, more times than not, will also close. So at nighttime, they're left to their own devices. And
there's only a few.
Oh, yeah, that's a good old internet.
Yeah.
You still?
No, I apologize. That was my phone.
Oh, just blame it on the internet, Brien. And everyone does.
Stupid internet.
Yep.
But here in Chicago, there are only a few select warming centers that are open 24 hours. But my biggest pet peeve is that the city sends these people to police stations or hospitals. Hospitals are not. They're not. Although most of them are warming centers, they do not have to take these people in by law. So they're not required to open their doors to homeless people. I know 3 hospitals in my area that refuse homeless people from sitting in their vestibules when it's cold outside. They absolutely refuse. They'll kick them out. They'll call the police on them. Everything else, which I think is totally wrong.
I've got to ask, are any of these publicly owned hospitals?
Some are and some aren't. Some are private.
Yeah, one would venture to say if you are a publicly owned hospital, like a county hospital or city, it seems like that shouldn't even be a question.
Well, and if you're a doctor who's taken an oath to do no harm,
right?
To be kicking these people out knowing that they could die, that seems to me like that's a little bit of harm.
Yeah, there was a couple of times where I've actually taken people, I wanted to see how the system actually worked, and I went with people to different hospitals. And the one day I had to go to 3 different hospitals and a police station to get this person help. And that's how hard it is for a homeless person to get even into a shelter.
Yeah.
And see, I think that's something that people don't understand. It's that Ebenezer Scrooge thing. Like, aren't there workhouses? Aren't there whatever?
Right.
Yeah, they are. But trying to get into them, or some people would rather not even go to all that trouble. And I think people forget that. Would you want to be that person doing that? No.
Well, not only that, how do they afford to get from one place to another?
Well, exactly.
Right.
Uber's not going to pick them up for free.
Hey,
Yeah, just to play devil's advocate here for a second. I mean, and I've heard this out of some people, and it kind of it's kind of disturbing in a way, but they're saying that aren't we enabling these people by providing them a safe place, by getting into a active lifestyle? I want to, again.
it would cost us less to get these people on track and back into society, stable living, other than throwing them in jail. What it costs,
Right.
$80,000 to $100,000 a year to care for them?
Yep.
Right. And the tiny house project, if you will, you say that there are going to be resources available. Are some of those resources going to be based upon maybe job training or,
Correct.
Go
Case
out?
management, job training, anything, budgeting. I mean, simple things like budgeting. People don't know how to budget anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's not being taught in our schools. It's not being taught anywhere.
Right.
And this is a social skill that people need to get back into society.
Right.
How much money is it going to take me to get to next week? How much money is it going to get me through the month? These are little skills that people need, and that's what we plan to implement through our tiny house case management.
Yeah, and you're right, and I wonder if that speaks to our society, because I remember, we had a personal finance class that we were required to take, and
Right.
it was as simple as how to balance your checkbook, how to budget, and
Right.
we were giving scenarios, and if you had to go out and get meals, how to budget for meals, and so on. So, and that's just not being done anymore. So, and you wonder why we have the problems that we do today.
Yeah.
So,
Correct. And just to get back to what you were speaking about before, you were talking about the demographics and nationalities and shelter systems. I think the major issue with that, at least in Chicago, and this is my opinion, is that the lower income areas aren't being developed here in Chicago. They're way under development. They don't have any case management in these areas. They don't have any socials, community centers in these areas. Of course, you're setting these people up to fail. You go into the upper class uptown here, where they're building developments. They've got a store on every corner and stuff like that. I mean, you can't live without a grocery store in your area.
Right.
And you go up to the west side, I don't see any grocery stores. How are they surviving out there? And then they wonder why these people are in shelters. I mean, that, in my opinion, that is the answer, is underdevelopment of actual areas.
Right. I was reading an article about economic development, in cities trying to bring in businesses, and I was reading an article that is proposing that one of the things that, since we're trying to attract businesses, and and the businesses are actually putting up bids to get a lot or something within a city, would it not make sense to require that business to donate a certain amount of money for a public housing unit that would house?
They do. They have what they call the TIF fund, but it's so misused here in Chicago, it's ridiculous.
I was about to say TIFs are...
They have options in the TIF fund. They could actually pay a fine and not build their percentage of low-income rentals. They could offer off-site rentals, or they could actually build the rentals in their property. Now, even if you decide to take what the city is more than leaning on now, are developers to take these low-income areas through TIF housing units, and then they're putting them in underdeveloped sites. So it'll cost them a quarter of what it would cost them to build these units in their development, and they're pushing the lower class out of that area, and I call it gentrification.
Yeah, that's a term that's used widely, specifically in Chicago. It's and I think what I'm alluding to is that to not allow any other deviation other than you have to build either a housing, and there's nothing, you don't have an option of buying out of this. You have to build it or create a development in the area.
Just in our area alone, the uptown area alone, we had 3 SROs closed down. It's over 200 people living in an area just thrown on the streets, basically. To build local luxury condos out of those buildings with no allocated space for affordable units.
Now that's heartbreaking to hear. It's and again, it's you want to see.
It's heartbreaking and it's sad because you want diversity.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and you want to see your city or your town be successful economically, grow economically, but you also want to see it take care of some of the people that are disadvantaged, and marginalized. That
Economic's great, but you need social as well.
Yeah, you need social development and economic development to work hand in hand. And and it is not socialism. I know people. You're talking about socialism, and it's not. It is creating a community, and there's nothing. There's nothing in a economic environment or a political environment that can label that as socialist. It's just taking care of people within the community,
right?
And those communities and it's well noted. A lot of statistics and research has proven the better cross section of community that you have and provide community resources to all social economic groups, the more healthy your community is going to be.
They flourish that way.
They do.
Right. Community centers where people can participate in activities together, and places for people to go that they have problems. They can seek help either through a social worker or through going to have maybe like a food pantry or somewhere that they can go and get food where they run short on a paycheck or what have you. So it's kind of disheartening that we're having to go through this exercise, but it's something that we hope that this tiny house development in Chicago flourishes, and perhaps it can be used as a model elsewhere. Are you familiar with any other communities that are trying something like this in the United States?
Oh yeah. There's I'm in touch with at least 4 of the local projects that are already out. The closest one to us would be the Wisconsin tiny house community, or even the New York, I would say.
Yeah, and New York, by the way, HUD is up there. New York City is they classify it as I think it's way up in the top 5.
Right.
So, that's.
And these communities are just totally flourishing, and I just wish Chicago would get on a bandwagon and just let us do our job.
So if any of you aldermen are listening, or if anybody out there knows some aldermen or knows any of the people running for mayor, let's put a bug in their ear and get this thing going, people.
Yeah, that's what we need.
Yeah,
and of course donations to get this site.
Absolutely.
Right. And we'll go and give people. In fact, in our promo to this, I think I put a link to the Tiny House website. And
actually, we just changed it to NGO extension, but we rerouted org to the NGO sites.
All right, and if you can get us that information, we will make sure to get it out there to our listeners as well.
No problem.
Yeah, and so what you're saying, it's automatically redirected to that site. Okay.
It'll redirect you if you go from org.
But we want to get all the updated information. And we also, Brien, please keep us informed and keep us up to date on what's going on so we can continue to let our listeners know what's going on as well.
I sure will. You guys are doing awesome, and thank you so much for having me.
And
we appreciate you so much.
Yeah, we want to, on behalf, even though we're not, we go to Chicago quite a bit. In fact, we'll be doing a show in Chicago here pretty soon.
But
It's something that we want to thank you for going out there and representing people that can't represent themselves. And
I have a huge team, so I want to.
Well, we
give a
thank
shout
all
out
of
to my
them.
team as well.
yeah, and tell them to get out there when these people get in front of the cameras and talk blah 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 blah.
Right.
They put up a big sign out in the back. Make sure the cameras get an eye on it.
Yeah.
And
Well, the only time you'll see me on camera is when I'm out there zoning, rallying for zoning. So.
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, I think we're going to go and close out the show. Brien, I can't tell you, we appreciate you setting aside the time.
To you both. It was
Yes,
awesome.
thank you so
Yes.
much.
And we will put this up on our YouTube channel. This makes the iTunes list, and we'll let people know. And again, we wish everyone a very safe weekend. And Brien, keep an eye on your people out there. We appreciate all the work you're doing, and we wish you a safe and happy weekend.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you. Goodbye for now.
Bye.
Bye-bye now.
You have been listening to The Bill and Callie Show on WVLP LP 103.1 FM and streaming live at WVLP.org or on your TuneIn app. Broadcast live from the historic 1 Center Street building in beautiful Valparaiso, Indiana. The Bill and Callie Show is underwritten by Bill Moran and Callie Rosella. This show will be rebroadcast on Saturday at 6 p.m. on WVLP. The Bill and Callie Show podcast is available on iTunes and YouTube. Have a wonderful week. Bye for now.